right. It's KP's Video News. I got a lot of stuff to discuss today. First off, I would like to say that the story about the medical examiner has declared the George Floyd death as a homicide, and so the Hennepin County medical examiner on Monday declared the death of George Floyd a homicide, saying he died of cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression. The update report from the examiner states that Floyd died from a loss of blood flow due to compression on his neck while being restrained by Minneapolis police. And so that update also, and the next update is the fact about the DC dunce, the idiot from DC just declared that what he was going to try to do is issue a decree to use the military against the people of the United States in order to so-called suppress what he considers riots. However, but it's what he's considering doing is actually against the law, and there should be no U.S. Forces ever used against the people of the United States. So we're going to see how far that's going to go. But this story that I'm going to talk about now is the story of a person that lost his life, and David McATEE, the owner of a barbecue business in western Louisville, was shot and killed by law enforcement officers early Monday morning, an incident that is now under state and local police investigation. McATEE was known as a community pillar. He has left a great legend behind. He was a good person. Everybody around him would say that. His mother said his son didn't hurt anybody. He didn't do anything to anybody. Riley was among the hundreds who have swarmed the corner of 26th and Broadway on Monday, where Louisville police and National Guard personnel were breaking up a large crowd that had gathered in the parking lot outside of a Dino's Food Mart, according to law enforcement officials. Chief Steve Conrad said in a statement on Monday how someone shot at officers and both officers and soldiers returned fire. The identities of the suspect and the law enforcement officers who returned fire have not been released. McATEE's barbecue business is located next to Dino's Food Mart parking lot, where the shooting took place around 12:15 a.m. today. His identity was confirmed by his nephew, and McATEE, 53 years old, operated a barbecue business at one of the West End's most popular corners, especially on the weekends. But those who knew the chef said he was known to cook at several community events across the area and area's 9 neighborhoods. Mr. McATEE would help us with the California Day for at least 15 years, if not longer, said Greg Cotton Jr., who lives in Middleton, said in an interview on Monday. He was one of the ones who would donate all his time and all his food. Everybody could just come up and take it, and he wouldn't charge it because it was for the neighborhood. McATEE's mother and his nephew told the media that he was known to feed the police as well. The two said he would give law enforcement free meals. He had fed them free, Riley said. He fed the police and didn't charge them anything. My son was a good son, and he did on that barbecue corner is to try to make $1 for himself and his family, and they just came along and killed him. Metro Council President David James described McATEE as a personal friend who cared about the California neighborhood and all other parts of the West End. He said the local chef was acknowledgeable about what was going on in the neighborhood and the city, but was always offer free food to those in need and others. He's just a good, decent person, James said. He believes in this neighborhood he loves his city, loves his neighborhood, and loves to cook food, loves to keep people happy, and his sense of humor is just a great guy. And McATEE's legacy is something that cannot be duplicated or replaced. And he said his family members are definitely mourning right now. And his mother said she lost a daughter on January 22nd, and now her youngest son has been killed. And now the mayor, Louisville mayor, says police involved shooting the restaurant owner didn't have activated body cameras. Here we go with that mess again. Louisville, Kentucky, Mayor Greg Fisher said police officers present at the shooting of the barbecue restaurant owner by officers and members of the National Guard did not have their body cameras activated at the time. Fisher also said Louisville Metropolitan Police Chief Steve Conrad, who previously announced his resignation in May, had been dismissed. A nightly curfew from 9 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. will be extended through June 8th, he added. And Governor Andy Beshear has ordered the state police to investigate the fatal shooting of David McATEE in the early hours of Monday morning and the release of any applicable body camera footage before nightfall. But the police and National Guard have claimed they were shot at while breaking up a large crowd in Dino Food Mart parking lot, and that they killed McATEE when they returned fire, although it is unclear whether McATEE fired the shot. Officials have not yet formally identified McATEE as the shooting victim, nor have they specified whether multiple officers or guardsmen shot McATEE. Local activists have questions whether the gathering being broken up was a protest or simply a gathering of customers for McATEE's barbecue. I think it's really important for the truth to get out there, Beshear said, but I think it's also really important in ensuring that we don't have violence if people can see, know that, bad or ugly, we're being absolutely transparent about it. Louisville has been rocked by protests over the death of both George Floyd, a Minnesota man who died when a police officer knelt on his neck, even as Floyd said he could not breathe, and Breonna Taylor, a Louisville emergency medical technician, killed in her home in March by police officers who broke down her door to execute a so-called no-knock warrant. So this is another black man killed by police. This time he was shot by the police and the National Guard. So it's really bad out there, folks. And what you really need to do is you really need to be careful, because, like I said at the beginning of this, the DC dunce is trying to put the U.S. military on the ground. So that means they're going to be out there in Humvees. You never know. They might even have some tanks on the streets. It's as a show of force. And by law, they're really not supposed to be able to do that, according to the 13th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution, that no military forces will be used against citizens of the United States. But we shall see. As we know, he's a lawbreaker. So we have to see where that's going to go. But you got to be careful. And he's talking about also declaring a 7 o'clock curfew for the whole entire country. So, the guy's, he's lost it. He's lost his, he's losing his doggone mind. And November's coming up soon. We got about 4 or 5 more months left. So get ready, get registered so you can vote. And the first thing you need to do is vote that idiot out of office as soon as you vote. Vote early, vote often. As rage over killings of black Americans sweep the nation, the Department of Justice has all but abandoned police investigations. And during the Obama administration, high-profile shootings of black men like Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Laquan McDonald in Chicago that would spark sweeping federal investigation reforms of biased policing practices. Now, a trio of wrenching deaths has again refocused the nation's attention on racial prejudices ingrained in the country's justice system, and protesters have filled the streets in recent days demanding justice for George Floyd, who died in a Minneapolis policeman knelt on his neck, and Breonna Taylor, who was shot by Louisville officers entering her home, allegedly without announcing themselves, and Ahmaud Arbery, who was gunned down by two white men who went free for more than 2 months until the video in the small town Georgia slaying went viral. But under the DC dunce, Trump, the Department of Justice has all but abandoned broad investigations into unconstitutional policing practices. A half a dozen former, let me move this a little bit, a half a dozen former justices, let's see here, half a dozen former DOJ lawyers who worked on similar cases said essentially giving up on one of the federal government's most effective tools to fight police misconduct. While the Justice Department launched 12 investigations of law enforcement agencies for practices that violate the Constitution during the Bush's first term, and 15 during Barack Obama's first term, the department has only opened a single public investigation of that kind in the 3.5 years since the DC dunce became president, according to legal experts. In the wake of the outrage in Minnesota and around the country, the Department of Justice is needed more than ever. And we have William Yeomans, who spent 26 years at the department prosecuting cases involving police misconduct and hate crimes. The DOJ should examine the Minneapolis Police Department from top to bottom. Every detail, every practice, every policy, every record of abuse of its power to use force, every complaint that has ever been launched against it. But the DOJ now is not going to do that. The Justice Department has announced more limited investigations into several of the recent deaths. The U.S. Attorney for Minnesota said last week that an investigation into officers involved in Floyd's death was a top priority. And a lawyer for Arbery's family told the media that federal officials had informed the family they intend to investigate the men who chased and shot him for possible hate crime charges. So I'm confident that justice will be served in the Floyd case. That's what Barr said in a statement Friday. However, activists and elected officials have been calling for broader investigations. On Thursday, Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee wrote to the DOJ to demand investigations into Minneapolis and Louisville police departments' practices and a probe of why Georgia officials took so long to make an arrest and file charges in the Arbery shooting. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar and 27 of her Democratic Senate colleagues have also called for a DOJ investigation into the Minneapolis department's practices. But former DOJ attorneys said they doubt Barr would be interested in such wide-range cases. And even if investigations were open, a department policy put in place by Barr's predecessor, Jeff Sessions, severely restricts prosecutors' ability to seek consent decrees, court-enforced agreements with police agencies that mandate reforms. A DOJ spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment about the department's use of police investigations or its plan to address the Floyd, Taylor, or Arbery killings. The Trump administration, police unions, and other groups representing officers have argued that the Obama administration went overboard in prosecuting police, harming officer morale, and making departments less effective. And in recent weeks, the department has called and cited the same legal authority that allows it to crack down on police misconduct for another target, stay-at-home orders. In at least 2 cases so far, the DOJ has supported churches that sued their state or city objecting to stay-at-home orders during COVID-19 pandemic, arguing that the orders were being unfairly enforced against churchgoers. Time out. That's what the DOJ just did. The DOJ planned to crack down on the cities and the states that ordered stay-at-home orders and closed churches. Today, June 1st, 2020, the DC Dunce has just announced that he's going to try to enforce a nationwide curfew, 7 o'clock nationwide curfew, backed by the U.S. military. Nothing, he didn't do not one thing to order the stay-at-home orders for the coronavirus. Now, for a peaceful protest, he's trying to activate the military against the people for protesting. All right, on with the story. It's an abduction of their responsibility. A lawyer who helped lead several DOJ investigations of police departments during the Obama administration, without the department training its site on law enforcement agencies, she said it means that there's just no check on these police departments. Congress gives the Justice Department the power to investigate biased policing practices, and in 1994, in the wake of the police beating of black Los Angeles motorist Rodney King, and 5 days of rioting in the city when 4 of the officers were acquitted about a year later, a new law let the DOJ open investigations and file civil lawsuits against any law enforcement agency with a pattern or practice of violating constitutional rights. Those investigations typically last months or years and involve holding public meetings, interviewing officers and community members, analyzing data and the local justice systems, and digging into case files. Ultimately, the DOJ can file a lawsuit to put in place a court-enforced consent decree, which would require a law enforcement agency to make specific reforms and allow a federal judge to monitor their progress. Over the last 2.5 decades, the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations collectively opened nearly 70 investigations of police departments and other law enforcement agencies around the country, leading to 20 consent decrees. The power was used aggressively under the Obama administration, which stepped up the use of the consent decrees. Court-enforced agreements in the cities like Ferguson, Cleveland, and Baltimore included laundry lists of reforms departments agreed to comply with, from de-escalation training and body cameras to changes in law and more equitable hiring practices. One high-profile shooting isn't enough to justify a pattern or practice investigation, former DOJ lawyer said, but sometimes cases that capture the national attention help cast a spotlight on the more systemic defects, such as police departments' excessive use of force or racially biased policies. You can't look at one case in isolation, an attorney at Harvard said, but you have to show the constitutional violation occurred across more than one case. The Minneapolis, Louisville, and Glenn County, Georgia police departments have never been the subject of pattern or practice investigations. And activists in all 3 jurisdictions have argued that the recent high-profile killings aren't isolated incidents, but are examples of a deeper-rooted problems. In Minnesota in 2015, federal review conducted at the request of a former police chief found the agency faced community perception of disparate treatment of communities of color, inconsistent supervision of officers, and flaws in how the agency flagged and tracked officers' bad behavior. The Metropolitan Star Tribune reported in 2013 that none of the 439 police misconduct cases handled by a then newly opened office resulted in a single instance of discipline, and the officer who pressed his knee into Floyd's neck had 18 prior complaints filed against him with the agency's Internal Affairs Division, according to the Minneapolis Police Department. Former Chief Harto stated that every recommendation the DOJ made in 2015 resulted in change at MPD, including renewed training for supervisors and the development of a system that flagged any complaints against officers early, no matter how minor, and kept track of those complaints and resulting discipline or coaching. They also commissioned a 2017 DOJ review of how the police can better handle protests. Demonstrations erupted in that city in the wake of a 2015 shooting of a black man by two white officers. One of the observations said DOJ made was police can do something simple to de-escalate or at least prevent escalation during angry protests by simply not appearing confrontational. If officers didn't have to be in riot gear, we put them in polos and khakis, she said, and the city, everyone on down, council members, everyone in leadership has to train for an event like what you are seeing today in Minneapolis. The city had begun to address that when the city's mayor demanded her resignation in 2017 after a high-profile police-involved shooting. Harto says she doesn't know what training has happened since she left. The Louisville Metro Police Department has faced multiple lawsuits alleging officers use race as a pretext to pull over black motorists and conduct racially biased seizures, as well as the scandal over two officers using the police department mentorship program to sexually exploit teenagers. A department spokeswoman said it does not comment about pending litigations. In Glenn County, where Arbery was killed, a local grand jury declared in a report last year that the police department suffered from an ongoing culture of cover-up, failure to supervise, abuse of power, and lack of accountability. The department has been engulfed in controversy involving alleged misconduct by a narcotics task force, which led to the police chief being indicted just days after Arbery was shot. The Glenn County Police Department did not respond for a request for comment. Christy Lopez, a Georgetown law professor and former DOJ lawyer who worked on police practices, said that she found it important to pay attention to local officials' reactions after a high-profile shooting occurred. If the reaction is one of shock and surprise and immediate attempt to figure out what happened, it's an indication that the incident might be an aberration, she said. But undue delays for law enforcement action after the Arbery and Taylor shootings could suggest there might be a tolerance for similar misconduct more broadly. So far, wide-ranging investigations and consent decrees that define the Obama administration's approach to police misconduct have all but disappeared under Trump. And since he took office, the department has made publicly only a single pattern or practice investigation. Former lawyers and civil rights law experts say in April 2018, probe of the Springfield, Massachusetts Police Department's narcotics unit, while two current and former police officers were indicted on federal charges for unreasonable use of force against Latino juveniles later that year. The status of the broad investigation is unclear, and a pattern of practice or investigation into police departments are typically made public, according to DOJ documents. And former lawyers said it would be all but impossible to conduct a full investigation in secret. Sessions spoke out against consent decrees and police investigations, and as Attorney General, ordering a review of existing decrees and arguing that the cases undermine the respect for police officers and create an impression that the entire department is not doing their work consistent with fidelity to law and fairness. Before Sessions left the department in November 2018, he put in place a memo that required consent agreements to be narrowly tailored to the inquiry caused by misconduct and limited the use of courts monitors among other stipulations. The document required attorneys to jump through ridiculous hoops in order to pursue a consent decree. While Barr has been as outspoken in Sessions about the issue, he said in 2019 confirmation hearing that he generally supports policies in Sessions' memo. The administration has also abandoned some of the cases that were started under the Obama administration, including a high-profile investigation into the Chicago Police Department 2 weeks after dashcam video of an officer shooting and killing a teenager, Laquan McDonald, was released. The DOJ opened a pattern or practice investigation into the Chicago Police Department's use of force that resulted in an extensive report or the department's practices and an agreement in principle that feds and the city signed in the last days of the Obama administration, agreeing that the two parties would move forward with a consent decree. But after Sessions took over, the department decided not to move forward with pursuing a consent decree. In 2017, then Illinois Attorney General Madigan essentially stepped into the role left open by the department, filing suit against the city of Chicago, and later won a consent decree despite Sessions' objections. So, under Trump, the department's Civil Rights Division has continued to investigate conditions in prisons and juvenile justice systems and has prosecuted individual malfeasance by law enforcement officers, which could continue with potential prosecution of the officers in the Minneapolis or Louisville shootings. In addition to the Springfield case, the department sued the Baltimore County Police Department in August 2019, alleging that its hiring practices discriminated by race, but that case didn't involve the county's actual policing activity, and DOJ lawyers are continuing to help enforce consent decrees that are already on the books. So, the president himself has also seemed to encourage police misconduct. In 2017 speech in New York, he told uniformed officers, please don't be too nice with suspects. When you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over, Trump said, making a motion with his hand to imitating an officer preventing a suspect's head from hitting a squad car. I said, you can take that hand away, okay? His press secretary later lied and said that he was joking. Early Friday morning, the president tweeted about the Minneapolis protests, threatening to send the military and declaring when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That phrase that appears to have been coined in 1967 by a controversial Miami police chief who bragged that his department didn't mind being accused of police brutality. Although Trump said later Friday that he didn't know the phrase origins and it hadn't meant as a threat. Some police unions and officers' advocacy groups have argued that the Obama administration went too far in its investigations of some police departments. Consent decrees hurt officers' morale and made police departments less effective. So you know this stuff is going on. It's going on, and you got to be aware, folks. Just got to be aware. When police lose confidence that police misconduct will be punished, you have what's going on right now. Citizens operating out of order because the justice system hasn't been operating in order. And said John Perry, the president of NAACP, he said, part of securing the peace is showing our citizens we're serious about accountability. Even as federal investigations have all but disappeared, the DOJ has used the same statute that allows it to crack down on rogue law enforcement agencies for another target in recent weeks: COVID-19 stay-at-home orders. In at least 2 cases so far, the DOJ lawyers have backed lawsuits by churches against governments that are banning them from operating under restrictions or gatherings. Bans that are unfairly applied to churchgoers and not to people conducting other essential activities, said violate the Constitution, the department argued, citing the same law that bans police departments from systematically singling out people of a certain race. So far, the department has weighed in on cases filed by local churches against Greenville, Mississippi, and the Democratic governor of Virginia. Federal lawyers also filed a brief Friday supporting 7 Michigan businesses suing the state's Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, over her order, although they didn't specifically cite the same statute. So, they're twisting up things and trying to make, this stuff here. So former DOJ lawyers say it's ironic that the department is suddenly using the same statute it has all but given up for police cases. They are using the police misconduct statute for the second time in 3 years in a case where plaintiffs are not even suing the police, but rather the Democratic governor, Lopez said. It certainly raises the question in my mind whether this is more about politics than police accountability. And that's the real deal, folks. That is the real true deal. And hey, that's what's going on right now, man. There's a lot of stuff going on in this country, and you have to be really truly aware. Really truly aware. I'm gonna do this one last story. One last story here, and it's Keith Ellison. And Keith Ellison, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, said Monday that his son's tweet in support of Antifa was more a comment about the absurdity of Trump's remarks, blaming proponents of the anti-fascist ideology for violence at recent demonstrations across the country over the police killing of George Floyd. I think what was a comment about the absurdity of the president's comments more than anything else, Ellison said on Monday. He said Minneapolis City Councilman Jeremiah Ellison tweeted on Sunday that he was declaring his support for Antifa. Unless someone can prove to me Antifa is behind the burning of black and immigrant-owned businesses in my ward, I'll keep focusing on stopping the white power terrorists that are actually attacking us, the young Ellison tweeted. His comment included a retweet of Trump's post announcing that he would be designating Antifa a terrorist organization, something that legally he cannot do. Keith Ellison, a former congressman and top Democratic National Committee official, said he has not seen any evidence that violence at demonstrations in Minnesota has been linked to Antifa, which is an umbrella term for loosely organized far-left groups that are often militant. We don't see what the president is talking about. I don't think the president sees what he's talking about. Ellison said he will not let the comments from the president, which he said are not helpful, distract or deter him from seeking justice for Floyd. He added that violent demonstrators are trying to tarnish the work of the peaceful protesters nationwide and need to be investigated. The D.C. dunce announced that he would declare Antifa a terrorist organization, followed a statement from Attorney General Barr that also blamed some of the violence carried out over the weekend on Antifa. And so basically, you got two liars, that are trying to take the blame from the Klan and the Nazis on the right that are infiltrating the protests and the peaceful protests, and that are throwing bricks and hiding their hands, that are breaking windows. When you're around a bunch of teenage kids, of course they're going to run into the Nike store, and then they'll throw a rock and hide their hand and disappear in the crowd. Now you got the mob mentality of the kids going into these stores, taking things that they can't afford, or their parents can't possibly afford. So I don't condone any of that. However, I do understand it, and I do also understand that and I do agree that there are outside forces out there, but I highly doubt that it's Antifa, because the president has a problem with Antifa because Antifa basically has been protesting against Trump. So anybody that protests against him, of course, he's going to elevate them and put them at the top of the list, on the top of his crap list. So, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on, folks. be careful, and you know, hey, check out your local news broadcast. You know, MSNBC, CNN, and check them out, because basically this whole thing that he's trying to do now by activating the U.S. military on U.S. soil, like I said before, it's basically against the law. It's a slight loophole that they may use, and it's like your local police, your local sheriffs, your local state police, and you've already activated National Guard in about maybe 20 states. That right there should be enough. Activating the Army, you know, or the Marines or whatever against the people of the United States is the dumbest shit I ever heard of in my life. And if it happens and he succeeds in doing this, and they open fire on people having peaceful protests for whatever reason, then you know who to blame. The DC dunce, Donald Trump. You know who to blame. And this is KP Video News. Right, y'all. It's KP Video News, y'all. That's who it is. KP's Video News. Peace.